Light Armored Recon in the LAV-25 has been an institution within the Marine Corps since the 1980s, but with Force Design 2030, now just called Force Design, they're experimenting with radically new equipment to tackle littoral reconnaissance in the Pacific. In this video, I'm going to cover the Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion's legacy mission and how it's structured and equipped down to the team level, including both the doctrinal organization and some more recent changes. In particular, I'll lay out how they structure their UAS or drones. I've talked to over a dozen Marines from across the 4 LAR battalions and several MOSs to piece together the general state of things. After that, I'm going to talk about how the LAR are experimenting to survive under the Marine Corps' Force Design 2030 concepts. The news isn't fully caught up on what's been going on. But first, I want to thank my patrons and channel members who make these videos possible. I've recently introduced 4 task forces that they can join the permanent role for and get featured in future content. In this video, the Expeditionary Regiment are getting their due. They're a bit special, and not just in the way the other branches say. But anyway, LAR battalions are one of the 3 organizations within the ground combat element dedicated to reconnaissance, the other 2 being the Lighter Reconnaissance Battalion and the Infantry Battalion's Scout Platoon. What currently sets the LAR Battalion apart from the Recon Battalion is it's an armored formation. In Army terms, LAR is the Armored Cavalry. The 2 have the same missions, and in terms of firepower, LAR is similar to Bradley Cav, although with a lower density of TOW missiles. The current Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion is technically distinct for its use of wheeled armored vehicles based on the LAV-2 family, the most numerous being the LAV-25. The 25 comes from the M242 Bushmaster 25mm chain gun, same as the Bradley fighting vehicle, but despite being an 8x8, it's smaller than a Striker. The LAR missions are armored reconnaissance, security, counter-reconnaissance, surveillance, defensive, and offensive operations. Reconnaissance is basically collecting critical information to answer the commander's priority intelligence requirements, or PIRs. This information can be about the enemy, but also terrain, route conditions, obstacles, and weather. This info can be attained violently, such as by a reconnaissance in force where a deliberate attack is made to gauge the enemy's disposition, strength, and a reaction, and develop the situation, or by fighting for information, where recon units punch through the enemy's own recon and security screen to directly observe or force a reaction from his main body. LAR is the only Marine recon organization suited for those offensive tasks, although they should be done in tandem with other sensors. LAR is capable of more stealthy, deliberate recon, utilizing its dismounted scouts and UAS, or more forceful and quick mounted reconnaissance that brings the LAV's fighting capabilities to the forefront. LAR battalions can also conduct aerial recon through organic small drones, sensor recon, and limited engineer recon. Engineer recon is basically collecting information on stuff that supporting engineers will need to address. So if LAR comes across an obstacle, it'll try to bypass it, but mark it and pass that information onto the engineers to potentially reduce it. Surveillance, on the other hand, is more about the passive observation of an area, usually from a static position or from a drone with endurance. This is connected to LAR's security mission. By providing early warning of the threat, they give their supported unit time and space to react. As well, because LAR has significant firepower up to including tank-killing TOW missiles, it's capable of attriting the enemy's advanced guard before it reaches the main body. Them whittling down the enemy means that the friendly main body doesn't have to deploy prematurely, messing up their timetable, doesn't get surprised, and doesn't come under observation by the enemy's recon. Destroying the enemy's reconnaissance so they can't gain essential information about friendly units is called counter-reconnaissance and an inherent task in all security operations. So like Recon, security exists on a continuum from only providing early warning and not fighting, to also fighting, such as during a guard or covering force when reinforced with fires and logistics. Security overlaps with defensive operations, and the LAR battalion has the ability to hold key terrain in its own right, although it's not as suitable as an infantry battalion. LAR units can perform limited counter-mobility tasks with the ability to lay simple mine and wire obstacles to disrupt units one echelon smaller, so a battalion can disrupt a company and a company a platoon. Likewise, the LAR battalion can conduct attacks not connected to a recon mission, such as an armored raid leveraging their mobility and long-range firepower. As well, when a commander has some armored vehicles with big guns, it's too good of an asset to not use, so direct fire support for infantry is also a secondary role of the LAR, especially in urban terrain. Now that the Marines don't have tanks, the LAVs are the asset best suited to it. Further, the LAR Battalion can be assigned its own battle space to act as a primary maneuver unit, ideally in sparsely populated areas suited to vehicle movement that are large enough that infantry would have trouble covering it. As for how LAR units are structured, there are 3 active and 1 reserve light armored reconnaissance battalion. On the active side, under the 1st Marine Division, there's a 1st Battalion at Camp Pendleton and 3rd Battalion at 29 Palms. And under the 2nd Marine Division, there's a 2nd Battalion at Camp Lejeune. In the reserve component, the larger 4th Battalion under the 4th Marine Division has companies spread across the country. But at the base of it all is the LAV-25A2 and its scouts. Each LAV-25 is crewed by 3 Marines: the vehicle commander, gunner, and driver. Usually LAV gunners rank Lance Corporal to Corporal, while drivers rank Private to Lance Corporal. In the back, they carry 3 dismounted scouts and 1 optional enabler. In LAV units, vehicle crews have their own MOS, 0313 for enlisted and 0303 for officers, while the scouts are 0311 riflemen, same as in rifle companies. LAR platoons consist of 4 of these vehicles. Vehicle 1 is commanded by the platoon commander, ranking lieutenant, while Vehicle 3 is commanded by the platoon sergeant, usually a staff sergeant but sometimes a gunnery sergeant. For you Army guys, commander is the right word here. The Marines just kept using the term for platoons, whereas the Army switched to platoon leader in late World War II. The LT and platoon sergeant lead the vehicles as 2 sections: Alpha section under the LT and Bravo section under the platoon sergeant. Generally, the senior of the 2 wingmen, usually a sergeant, is Vehicle 2 in Alpha section, while the junior vehicle commander, usually a corporal, is Vehicle 4 in Bravo. On the dismounted side, scout team leaders generally rank between Lance Corporal to Corporal. The senior scout in the platoon is the squad leader and can rank up to sergeant. It can vary though. 1 scout per company is also the chief scout. They're usually a sergeant and are the tactical advisor to the company commander for the employment of dismounted scouts. With dismounts, they employ a mix of terminologies that can be slightly confusing. Each LAV has a 3-man scout team. These teams are part of a scout squad, whose leader is generally a sergeant. The squad is split into 2 sections that mirror the LAV sections. The squad leader is an Alpha section, while Bravo section is led by an assistant squad leader. As far as weaponry, I've been told some slightly different things depending on the unit. The Legacy Scout Team organization, which seems to still be common, is a team leader, automatic rifleman, and grenadier. Almost everyone in the platoon, including LAV crews, are armed with the M4 carbine. The automatic rifleman, however, is armed with an M27 IAR. The grenadier is also armed with the M320 grenade launcher, although depending on the unit, this could go to a team leader instead if they're better with it. I'm told though that all 0311 dismounts will eventually be armed uniformly with the M27 IAR with a squad common optic, functioning as a universal rifle, automatic rifle, and marksman rifle. Although, based on photos on DVids from 2025, the M4 is still very common. As far as supporting weapons, each LAV-25 has an M240 Bravo 7.62 medium machine gun mounted, which can be dismounted for use by the scouts. M240s in the Marine Corps are usually used with the machine gun day optic, a Trijicon ACOG 6x48. I'm told they generally like dismounting at least 1 for use by the Alpha section, and ideally 1 for Bravo as well, as platoons often operate split across wide distances so the 2 sections can't support each other. On paper, each scout team leader is in theory also meant to be trained on the use of the M107 Sasser, a 50 cal anti-materiel rifle. In one squad leader's case, his platoon would get 1 for use by the assistant squad leader, with the secondary being the squad leader. However, he tells me that there isn't a great understanding from higher on how to employ it effectively. Another tells me he hardly ever sees it used because of redundancy with the 25mm on the LAVs, and another tells me he's never seen it and actually thought it was out of service. There have been photos posted on DVids of Sasser and Maz ranges within the past year, so it's definitely still in service, but the main takeaway here is it seems underutilized. Speaking of it, the M3A1 Maz, America's version of the 84mm Carl Gustav recoilless rifle, is available to the Scouts. The Maz is generally reserved for anti-mechanized defense or when the platoon is setting up an anti-armor ambush. Depending on the unit and time period, it can be either entirely situational in its use or issued at 1 per section, usually carried by Vics 2 and 4. Some units even have a dedicated Rocketeer for it. The platoons also employ drones, which I'll expand on when I get to the battalion organization so you can get the big picture. As for attached enablers, the essential one is the platoon corpsman, a Navy medic ranking around hospitalman 3rd class equivalent to a corporal. They usually sit in Vehicle 3 with a platoon sergeant, as in American practice, the platoon sergeant is responsible for coordinating CASEVAC. At least one LAV mechanic with a 2147 MOS is specifically earmarked for the platoon and organic to the company. Their seating is up to platoon commander discretion, but they often sit in the 1 Vic. I've been told by others that they're starting to see 2 mechanics per platoon, and if so, the second sits in 4 Vic. One level up from the LAR platoon is the LAR company. Traditionally, the company consists of 3 line platoons, a weapons platoon with mortar and anti-tank sections in support, and a headquarters platoon. However, in 1st and 2nd LAR, the 3rd line platoon was largely disbanded, although the table of organization hasn't changed. As well, in units where a significant number of ultralight vehicles were issued for experimentation, the mortars and mortarman billets were removed temporarily, but they're coming back. The reason for downsizing partially had to do with deployment constraints. During GWOT, LAR deployed as a whole battalion. While they weren't doing conventional warfare, sending everything wasn't a problem. On the side, they were sending 1 reinforced platoon to each Marine Expeditionary Unit, or MU. Generally, this reinforced platoon would get a slice of supporting LAVs and receive additional training in conducting armored raids and tactical recovery of aircraft and personnel. However, now all that's left for deployments are MUs and the Unit Deployment Program, or UDP. No big battalion-sized deployments for LAR. After tank battalions were deactivated and the AAVs were pulled from regular deployments due to a 2020 accident that killed 9, LAR was used to fill a capability gap aboard the MUs. As a result, company-sized LAR deployments on MUs became more common. However, there are severe space restrictions aboard the ships carrying the MU, and LAR companies have a significant number of supporting vehicles. It seems that companies in 1st and 2nd LAR, which do more MUs, went from 3 to 2 line platoons to fit a whole company, although the company maintains the original vehicles. 3rd LAR, on the other hand, which does more UDP deployments to places like Japan and has all the maneuver space at 29 Palms, retained the classic 3-line and 1 weapons platoon structure. But moving on from that explanation, the traditional weapons platoon includes a mortar section and anti-tank section with their own platoon commander, gunny platoon sergeant, often actually a senior section leader filling in, and attached corpsman and mechanic. The platoon commander is a fire support team member like in rifle companies, although the LAR company has a dedicated fires officer in the HQ platoon as well. The corpsman usually goes with mortars because when the ATs reinforce line platoons, they have access to that platoon's corpsman. Starting with mortars, the LAR company is TO'd 2 LAV-MA2 mortar carriers, which are armed with an M252 81mm mortar and pintle-mounted M240 Bravo, and capable of carrying 90 mortar rounds. The mortar can be employed mounted or from the ground. Each has a base crew of 5, a squad leader, mortar gunner, assistant gunner, ammunition man, and LAV-M driver. As well, one is meant to carry a fire direction NCO and computer as an organic fire control element. The first squad leader is also the section leader and ranks staff sergeant. In units without a weapons platoon, these are generally part of the HQ platoon. As well, there was a recent period where some companies did not have any mortars at all. This was basically to make room for ultralight tactical vehicles. However, the allotment of ULTVs is being reduced to a number I'll bring up in the section on Force Design 2030, and the companies that lost them are now transitioning back to 2 mortars. The anti-tank section, meanwhile, is doctrinally equipped with 4 LAV-ATs armed with the Sabre tow system capable of firing TOW-2 anti-tank guided missiles. These are usually attached to line platoons directly, with additional for the main effort. In units without a weapons platoon, one LAV-AT is generally attached directly to each line platoon, although others have the full 4. Each LAV-AT is crewed by a commander, gunner, driver, and loader, with 2 missiles in the hammerhead and 14 missiles stowed. The weapon systems are manned by O-352 anti-tank missile gunners, and have been seen time to time employing the Javelin anti-tank guided missile system dismounted as well, although I'm told its use is inconsistent unit to unit, and Javelins may not even be held by the LAR. In that case, when AT dismounts, they normally become an M240 section. Above these combat elements, the HQ platoon is a grouping of the company HQ, a scout section, logistics section, and anything else that's attached or added ad hoc for experimentation. The company HQ includes 2 LAV-25s, one for the company commander and one for the master gunner. The scout section with its 6 scouts is merely for furnishing dismounts for these LAVs and doesn't have a special company level role. The company HQ also doctrinally has 2 LAV C2A2s, a command and control vehicle crewed by a driver, commander, and housing 5 workstations. Like in the Army, the company executive officer, the second in command, runs the company's combat operations center from this vehicle. The second is theoretically for the CO as an alternate, although usually the CO prefers to lead from an LAV-25. In that case, the second C2 is used by the company fires officer, who's also JTAC qualified and follows the CO when the company splits in 2. The logistics section, meanwhile, consists of the last LAVs in the company. They've always had one LAVR maintenance and recovery vehicle. It's equipped with the 6,600 pound rated extendable rotating boom and a 30,000 pound rated rear winch, with the ability to recover and tow dead LAVs and perform organizational and limited intermediate field maintenance. They also have LAVLs, which have changed in number over time. These are basically cargo carrying variants of the LAV. There are no trucks in the TO of the LAR company. All the MTVR 7 tons, JLTVs, and Humvees are part of the Battalion H&S company. The LAVL's job is to deliver rations, ammo, fuel, spare parts, and equipment to units deployed away from road networks. It has a cargo capacity of 5,600 pounds and recessed tie-downs. It's capable of being loaded by forklift or crane, and can hold 2 litters for CASEVAC. Generally, when larger UAS or drones are used by the company, they'll be carried in the LAVLs as well. It's also the only LAV variant other than the LAVR capable of towing and recovery. Most recent doctrine lists 4 LAVLs per company, although this can be fewer in practice. I've been told by an LAV mechanic that there's generally 1 dedicated to ammo under the command of the operations chief, 1 for maintenance under the company ramp chief, and 2 for casualty evacuation, 1 under the first sergeant. The doubling up of CASEVAC lodges and C2s in some units makes it easier to task organize the company under Alpha and Bravo or lead and follow HQs for semi-independent operations. How Weapons Platoon is task organized depends heavily on the situation and what that specific unit has kicking around. But one example could be Alpha, built around the first line platoon's 4 LAV-25s, plus a second platoon if it's 3rd LAR, as well as the commander's LAV-25, a C2 for the fires officer if it's a company with 2 of them, the first sergeant's CASEVAC Logi, ops chief's ammo Logi, the recovery vehicle, 2 mortars, and 1 or 2 ATs per platoon, the extra AT with the main effort platoon. Bravo, meanwhile, would have a line platoon, Master Gunner's LAV-25, C2 for the executive officer, CASEVAC Logi, maintenance Logi with mechanics aboard, and 1 AT. Another example could be all LAV ATs going with the lead HQ, while the mortars go with the following element. It's one of those it depends things. Moving on up, each active duty LAR battalion consists of 3 of these line companies lettered Alpha through Charlie, plus an administrative H&S company. They used to have a Delta company, but these were deactivated at least 7 years ago. The reserve 4th LAR is larger though, with 6 line companies lettered Alpha through Fox. The H&S company consists of a battalion headquarters, company headquarters to handle H&S's own administration, communications platoon, maintenance platoon for the LAVs, service platoon primarily for supply and food service, motor transport platoon, medical platoon, security platoon, command vehicle section, and electronic warfare section. In theory, the Battalion H&S Company on the active side is meant to have 4 LAV-25s, 6 LAV-C2s, 6 LAV-Ls, 3 LAV-Rs, and 4 LAV Mobile Electronic Warfare Support Systems. The last variant's job is to intercept, collect, and disrupt enemy communications via electronic warfare equipment. Although it's under the administrative control of the LAR Battalion, it's actually an asset for the Marine Expeditionary Force to employ, sort of like the Force Recon Company is to the Recon Battalion. By contrast, the Reserve Battalion is TO'd 8 LAV-25s, 4 C2s, 4 Ls, and 2 Rs. In terms of drones, each level of command in the LAR Battalion has its own. At the lowest levels, 0311 scouts and in some cases 0313 LAV crew members are trained as incidental UAS operators. They can operate Group 1 UAS like the X-2D Skydio and R-80D Sky Raider quadcopters, which are small enough to be carried in a backpack and employed in a hasty manner to directly increase the vision of scout teams and the LAR platoon. Generally, a company gets 3 to 4 of these. The company also usually gets 2 RQ-20 Bravo Puma fixed-wing drones, which are usually employed at the company level. These are used more for surveilling and targeting high-value and high-payoff targets because of their longer endurance. At the battalion level, specifically trained 7316 Small Unmanned Aircraft Systems operators are authorized to operate the VX-30 Stalker, a Group 2 UAS and primary system for battalion-level missions. The Stalker combines aspects of quadcopters and fixed-wing aircraft, with the 4 upwards-facing propellers facilitating vertical takeoff and landing, and a nose-mounted propeller and conventional wings for efficient flight. No need for a catapult or runway. It has a 4-hour endurance with batteries, or 8 with propane fuel cells according to Lockheed Martin, and a communications range of 160 kilometers. Now that you know what an LAR battalion currently is, what's their future? As the heaviest remaining armored fighting force left in the Marine Division, they're figuratively fighting for survival to stay relevant in the Pacific theater. The Marine Corps' Force Design 2030 is heavily tied to the Navy's Sea Control mission. The forces designed specifically for it are low signature, meaning hard to detect, and geared towards maritime reconnaissance and littoral regions, including coastline and small islands. They do this to find targets, cue fires, telling everyone where to look and shoot, and disrupt the enemy's ability to do the same. The problem is that in order to create that time and space between the friendly fleet and the enemy in a maritime fight, it requires a force to not be detected and blown to smithereens by forces beyond their comprehension. It also forces the enemy to expend more intelligence, surveillance, and recon assets to find supporting forces instead of the main force. Landing an LAV section on some random island to place SIMRAD boat radars doesn't really make sense, so the active duty LAR battalions are experimenting with new structures and are slated to be redesignated as mobile reconnaissance battalions in the future. First LAR converted one of its companies into a maritime reconnaissance company. Second LAR did the same but a light mobile reconnaissance company, although I'm told by multiple people that this has been reduced in size. And third LAR is trialing a light armored company. First LAR's Maritime Recon Company, or MRC, focuses on the employment of purpose-built ocean-going tactical boats, called Multi-Mission Reconnaissance Craft, or MMRCs, and Companion Unmanned Surface Vessels, or USVs. Outside of 1st LAR, MMRCs are currently being tested by the 4th Assault Amphibian Battalion's Charlie and Delta companies, which were redesignated as Littoral Craft companies. Their main job would be to maneuver personnel and sensors on water to identify and track high-value surface vessels, increase friendly maritime awareness, and limit the enemy's freedom of movement by cueing additional sensors and fires. The uncrewed boats would basically extend the range of sensors by pushing out beyond the landmass where Marines have landed. Initial proposals for this company called for an HQ and 3 maneuver platoons, each with an HQ element and 3 sections of 2 manned MMRCs and 2 USVs, although this is all highly experimental and pre-decisional. Second LAR's Light Mobile Reconnaissance Company, or LMRC, primarily use ultralight tactical vehicles, drones, and commercial off-the-shelf navigation radars to try and blend in with civilian shipping while still providing usable tracking data on enemy activity. ULTVs can be internally loaded into the Marine Corps' Ospreys and CH-53s, have a significantly lower signature than the LAV, and can be operated on undeveloped islands with dense vegetation. However, I've also been told that the experimental company has been reduced in scope. The Light Mobile Recon company was stood down, converted back into a regular LAR company, and they've been testing different ULTV integrations since then. Initially, they tried standard line companies with an additional 4 ULTVs but no mortars. 2 ULTVs would be attached to each of the 2 line platoons. Now, however, most ULTVs are currently contained within the battalion commander's jump platoon in the HNS company, but LAR companies are also getting a surveillance and target acquisition team, and they're getting their mortars back. The basic template for an STA team is 2 UTVs, each with 3 to 4 scouts depending on who you ask. The team has an M240 Bravo, M3 Moz, and M107 Sasser to employ if needed. For now, I wouldn't be so quick to assume that the LMRC was shut down because it was a bad idea. They may just be testing other ways of employing ultralights and could come back to it. There's been significantly less detail written about the 3rd LAR's Light Armored Company concept. From what I've been told, they continue to operate with a doctrinal setup with 3 line platoons per company plus weapons. Their experimentation has been much less dramatic than the other 2 battalions, largely confined to 1 experimental platoon stood up in the H&S company for testing new gear and concepts. This included ultralight tactical vehicles, dirt bikes, and UAS, as well as communications equipment. It's been reported in the news that the 1st and 3rd LAR, as well as 1st Recon, have trained together with battery-powered 0MMX motorcycles. In cross-battalion training, LAVs were used to recharge the bikes. All this is to say that they're looking to shift the conception of LAR from being centered around a single platform, the LAV-25, and more towards a platform-agnostic approach to reconnaissance and counter-reconnaissance. Just now, instead of screening a semi-mechanized Marine division against an armored threat, it'd be screening the fleet and MLRs on expeditionary advanced bases against the enemy's naval and air power. However, there are some competing realities. The future LAR force is still tied to the Advanced Reconnaissance Vehicle program, a wheeled armored vehicle with a 30mm autocannon made by either General Dynamics or Textron and designed to replace the LAV-25. It's been called into question whether this program is the best use of money and resources, and they could potentially reduce the program's scope like they did with the amphibious combat vehicle. But a criticism of the whole Force Design 2030 thing is that the units it has created, the Marine littoral regiments that were converted from 3rd Marine Division formations, don't have a lot of combat power. They can't be easily converted back into a conventional regiment because the restructuring was so drastic. The same argument could probably be made for an LAR battalion converted into an MRB that's more boat and ultralight than armored. However, decades of landlocked counterinsurgency has driven a wedge between the Marine Corps and Navy, and big things have to be done to reorient the Marines around the Navy's sea control mission. At the same time, the entire Marine Corps is not being redesigned as MLRs. They still plan to have 3 MEUs with joint forcible entry capability at sea simultaneously in the late 2020s, more resources dedicated to their generation, and Marine divisions that can still be partially mechanized by ACVs, although the overall force would be less mechanized than before because the ACV will be roughly half the legacy AAV force. Still, a light armored recon capability will likely be needed for ground combat elements. The Marines want to be capable of expeditionary advanced base operations, but not designed exclusively for it. Prototypes of the ARV from the 2 vendors have been delivered to the Marine Corps this year, and the concept is meant to be evaluated for an actual procurement decision. But nothing is sacred. Tanks and Scout Snipers had a lot more cultural capital than LAR, and they were disbanded or made a reconnaissance battalion trade pretty rapidly. In an environment where fat is being cut and whole MOSs are getting deleted, and now conventional ground force capability is getting cut across the whole armed forces, even if they evolve to slot into Force Design 2030, being seen as redundant is something that the LAR community has to worry about. If this video was informative, please consider joining my Patreon. In the future, I want to do a Build Your Own Brigade series where I do broad case studies and synthesize them into one of 4 fictional task forces which my supporters are a part of. They may also have a hand in deciding the direction of the task forces. I plan to redo some of my merch benefits to integrate their themes and insignias, so go check that out and I'll see you over there.